Thanks very much for allowing me to speak on this bill. I'm an attorney with the Michigan Poverty Law Program, and I'm here on behalf of the Michigan Advocacy Project, which speaks on behalf of issues that relate to low-income citizens of the state of Michigan in many different areas of the law, including housing, family law, elder law, and consumer protection. As an attorney, I've been working with low-income families for probably 15 years now, representing parents in custody disputes in Michigan, those who are low-income. And I want to talk specifically about some of the issues that this bill will have and will affect our low-income citizens. My position is that the committee should oppose this bill. And I'm not going to, I did submit written testimony that goes into a lot more detail than I will this morning. I also don't want to repeat some of the comments that have already been made in opposition to this bill, and particularly the comments made by Kent Weichman. But as I said, I do want to talk about how this bill is going to affect our parents who are in poverty. As has already been mentioned, just because we mandate joint custody doesn't mean that that's necessarily what's going to happen among our families. Equal time mandated by the court doesn't always translate to equal time in practice. There is always been and always will be an incentive for some parents to seek equal parenting time in order to gain an advantage in child support. Over my years in practice, I've seen that over and over again. And again, even if the order does say that the parents have joint custody, if a parent chooses not to exercise that, the child support provision is still in place. And again, as was mentioned earlier, child support, when parenting time is equal, child support is drastically reduced. The effect that has on the lower income family parent can be pretty substantial. And on top of that, when that other parent who may be paying some child support chooses not to exercise that joint custody, leaving the lower income parent with having to still provide a home, provide all the utilities, everything that child needs for a joint custodial arrangement, that parent is at a disadvantage financially. The other effect that this bill is going to have on low-income families is the incredible expense that is going to be foisted on low-income families or a low-income parent who feels the need to protect their child by trying to challenge the presumption of joint custody. As has already been noted, the standard is a clear and convincing standard to show that the other parent would be unfit. That's a very high burden. As has already been mentioned, it's going to result in mudslinging. It's going to be contentious. It's going to require lots of financial resources to find an attorney, to hire an attorney to come into court to challenge that. And that burden falls to the parent who's attempting to protect that child, whether it's from substance abuse, whether it's from neglect of the child, whether it's from domestic violence. And when you think about that, those huge attorney fees, think about the effect that has on our low-income parents in the state. We have legal services available. Our services are not adequate to serve all of the low-income families. You talk to any legal services attorney or program, and we will tell you the number of families that we have to turn away from services. We don't have the resources to serve everyone that needs it. So the idea that there's this limited access available to legal services for low-income families is going to really hit hard if this bill passes. And again, particularly when we're talking about protecting Michigan's children, the parent who feels the need to protect the child is at a complete disadvantage. I also want to mention the effect that this could potentially have on families and on our court system post-judgment. Once a judgment is entered, with the presumption of joint physical custody, any disputes that come up over the course of that child's life for the next 18 years, if we're talking an infant, if those parents are continuing to have conflicts and disagreements, they're going to be coming back to court and asking our judges to resolve those disputes. Again, that's a drain on our court system, it's a drain on the financial resources of Michigan's families. I will say that certainly the current standard that we have for joint custody under our laws, as again was mentioned by the representative, is that the court must consider joint custody, and if parents agree to it, order it, unless it's not in the child's best interest. That standard is working perfectly well, because it recognizes that families that agree on joint custody, that agree that it can work, that are focused on what's best for their children, those families will work out a joint custody arrangement and they'll be successful. And in practice, as a result of that standard, many attorneys will tell you that in their practice, judges, while there isn't a preference for joint custody, judges clearly recognize that joint custody is good for children where the parents are in agreement and where it will work in that family. And judges don't hesitate to grant joint custody. And so I think it's worth recognizing that our current provision as regards joint custody is working. I guess I also want to just respond briefly to the constitutional issue that's been raised here. It's true that under U.S. U.S. court decision, the Troxel decision recognized a fundamental right that all parents have to parent their children. But it's a leap to say that from that standard we go to mandatory equal time. It's not. It wasn't a part of this decision. It's not a part of any constitutional right that parents have. It recognizes the fundamental right to each parent to parent, but it doesn't mean it's equal time. It could be any number of parenting time arrangements would still satisfy that standard, from equal time to only summers to weekends to supervised parenting time. And so I think it's a leap to say that that fundamental right mandates this legislature to order or support a bill that mandates joint custody. And I guess I also just want to touch on the issue of domestic violence, and you'll probably hear more about that hopefully, and so I'll just spend a minute on it. Many of our clients, our low-income clients, are domestic violence victims. In legal services, we have to prioritize those cases, so we choose those cases where the rights of the parent and the child are fairly substantial. So we do represent a lot of domestic violence victims. The effect that this bill will have on domestic violence victims is pretty substantial and negative. Michigan's already recognized that domestic violence is an important factor when it adopted the domestic violence factor in our best interest, the 12 best interest factors. And placing the burden on the victim of domestic violence to prove by clear and convincing evidence that a perpetrator of violence in the family is unfit is an incredibly high burden. First of all, there's no standard that says that domestic violence equals unfitness. I've had many cases where I can't even think of one case where a domestic violence perpetrator has been found unfit in any of my family cases. So you can't make that conclusion. And simply exempting domestic violence from this bill isn't going to resolve the problem, because of the issues that survivors face in coming forward and identifying themselves as a victim, in facing the retaliation from the perpetrator if they do raise domestic violence in court, is real to these survivors. And as I said, the burden of proving domestic violence is, it's hard enough to do it in cases with just a clear or just with a preponderance of evidence standard. We all know domestic violence primarily happens behind closed doors. There aren't always a lot of witnesses to it. It's fairly difficult to prove. And so I think in the interest of protecting our parents who are victims of domestic violence, who are simply trying to protect their children, I don't think this bill is going to help those families at all. Thank you.